lovelies. Housekeeping. Rack and Ruin #1 is out, providing some house rules for playing goblins as races class, and some house rules for old school games to make them more fun, in my opinion. So, skill system and a way of handling J-random stunts in combat effectively, rather than just rolling to hit. Thonk, 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 thonk. I'm dead. Thonk, thonk. Yeah, instead of that. And it's going to be a series, so if there are any other monstrous races as classes you would like to see, let me know. I'm trying to stick to the more normal-ish playable ones, so keep that in mind. But yeah, go and check that out if you want to see my take on goblins in old school games. It's most specifically, I guess, Rules Cyclopedia and OSE compatible. I had a long talk with Paddy O'Cakes over on Grim Streams. Audio was bad for the first little snippet of video we did, but then the second recording went fine. So long, sprawling discussion about all the fallout from my comments about Trump. But the conversation was pretty good. Yeah, I always say I'm willing to talk to anybody. Very few people ever take me up on it. Paddy wanted to, and I think we had a productive discussion, though I think there were some assumptions being made that simply weren't true about what I said, why, and where I was coming from, but it seemed to get sorted out a bit. We also talked about the falling out, though nothing to do with me, really, with the Red Room. The work on the house should be properly started and finally completed in the next couple of weeks, and after then should be back to service pretty much as normal here. I will finish out the Roll for Insight questions that I still have, and that will be an end to this season, unless someone else who works in design or is an RPG influencer or whatever wants to tackle some questions, in which case I will give them the space to do so. But otherwise, yeah, a couple more weeks we should be back to the regular sort of reviews and so on, longer videos. I did take a bit of a hit, not as bad as I would have thought, with all the Trump fallout. So loyal viewers, if you feel so inclined, find an old video or something that you liked a lot, share it around, suggest people subscribe to me if you like my calm Xanax demeanour and the kind of things I talk about. It was weird, really. I had people saying, no, you should talk about politics more. Ooh, not like that. So that was fun. But yeah, getting back up to where I was would be nice. The subs are starting to trickle back in, but yeah, it'd just be nice to get back to where I was. It'll happen organically anyway, I'm sure, but still. Of note, I've used the West End Games style D6 system for a bunch of projects in the past. It's a game system I like a lot. There is currently a Kickstarter for a new version of the D6 system, with some updates and clarifications and so on. It's not by the original rights holders, and it's not yet clear whether it will be a licensed version of the system or not. But given that we have, by which I mean whether anybody can use it, but given that we already have open D6, and these are going to be permutations on the D6 system, and that mechanics can't be copyrighted, I don't foresee there being a problem using some of these new ideas and ways of doing things from this system to create your own stuff for OpenD6 and selling it, but I guess we'll find out. But they haven't clarified that yet. But if you love the D6 system, whether you started with West End Games, D6 Star Wars or Ghostbusters or whatever else, it's probably worth toddling over to Kickstarter and searching for D6 System 2nd Edition and checking that out, because it might interest you, and it's not too pricey, even for the hard copy. Right, on to comments. On my Savage Worlds / Deadlands review, Doc Necrotic says, as for Deadlands, I love Deadlands, but I'm still not fond of the sensor eraser for the Confederate faction from the setting. Were they always kinda stupid to include it for various reasons? Yes. There is basically no way that side could have won or even gotten a draw for the Civil War. But they're easy baddies for a game, and the setting had a totally gonzo fantasy reasons for why they exist. So screw it. Yeah, I felt that was weird, because like the Nazis, the Confederates or the Confederate rump or leftover Confederates or diehard Confederates make for great baddies for games, easy baddies for games, and kind of retconning the CSA faction, yeah, it's one of those things that I think takes the kind of interesting parts of the setting and excises them, meaning that you have to rely more and more on sort of monster of the week, less intrigue, less out and out battles and so on, and it makes the rail wars harder to make work as well. Harry Turtledove did a kind of continuity CSA thing, so I think it can, there are ways you can make it work. Foreign intervention in the US Civil War, you know, various other things. There are things you can do that could prop up a Confederate state. So yeah, it can be done. Getting rid of it just doesn't make much sense to me. Yeah, they're meant to be a sort of bad and evil faction, and there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I agree with you there. That's part of what's made the new edition so relatively ballless compared to the original, I think. Ace Up in a Sleeve says, I never liked Savage Worlds. The exploding dice make probabilities weird at high difficulties. The use of attributes versus skills is weird. The extra d6 for wild cards make probabilities kind of opaque. The damage system is weird. The use of cards is weird. And the fact that spells are pre-made makes customization for different settings a bit boring and makes all spellcaster classes feel the same. It's just too noisy and not clean enough for my taste for a universal system. It just feels like a pile of random rules. I do like the idea of using different polyhedral dice for stats, but I much prefer the way Fabula Ultima does it. That's all unfortunate because I do love the Deadlands setting. Yeah, not to be all pundit, but I've used different polyhedral dice and their combination in actual fucking monsters, and I think that works pretty well. Savage Worlds takes it even simpler, I suppose. But yeah, the exploding dice do kind of make it hard to judge exactly how good, how difficult anything particularly is, because, you know, the lower the facing number on the dice, the more likely you are to roll the maximum and to explode the dice, which does make it not easily predictable, though I'm sure someone has crunched all the numbers on it. I'd say Savage Worlds is like a petrol engine. You know, the basic central part of it is very simple, but it takes a lot of bullshit piled on top to make it work. To wit, Rhino Watcher says, I thought it was weird that Jim thought it was a complicated system. Okay, that's not exactly what I'm saying. The big example that I always use of the problem is Tristat, because if you take it just purely very simply, Tristat is very simple. You know, you have 3 stats, very basic system that covers everything. Fine. But the problem with Tristat is that you then, on top of that, you layer all of these sort of merits and flaws and powers and skills if you're using them, and then the skills all have different costs depending on the genre of the setting, and so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes. So Savage Worlds, in a similar way, you know, the base system is pretty simple, but also pretty quirky. But then you're layering all your edges and hindrances and everything on top of that, and then they all have to interact with each other, right? Again, another example might be Magic the Gathering. You know, it's all very simple until you have 2 cards that interact with each other in some way, and how do you call which way they actually act together? So the complication comes through the permutations and everything that you layer on top. That's what makes it complicated and difficult, and puts a lot of emphasis on the games master to interpret whatever is there. On the old Star Wars review, Mark Chukowski says, were you going to do a new video talking about the new D6 system, 2nd edition from West End Games that they just put on Kickstarter? Well, I've already mentioned it. I don't tend to do videos about crowdfunded stuff specifically. If I mention it, it's going to be in comments or something somewhere. I will, however, review it after it's out, because I like the D6 system a lot. On the Old Fat Conman video, Dash Rogue says, the people who tried to cancel you for not being politically correct enough weren't Trump supporters. The Trump supporters were probably the ones most likely to defend you and support your artistic freedom. It's time for you to admit that the left turned into totalitarian monsters. Again, I would remind you that the US does not have a left. There is an authoritarian streak in all US politics, but it is far stronger and more dangerous on the right. On the left, it is more social, which is still bad, but not as bad as utilizing state power to do the same sorts of things. As recent experience has shown, the Trump supporters, the American far right, are fine until you disagree with them, until you say something they don't like. And then, if anything, in many ways they're even worse than the American left, and hypocrisy always bothers me a great deal. So you can't say that you're for free speech and free expression, and offensive speech should be fine and there shouldn't be consequences for it, and then turn around and clutch your pearls immediately afterwards when someone says something that you don't like. Yeah, it annoys me. Numberi says, farming hate, Jim, is trash. Unsubscribe, folks. I was not in any way, shape or form farming hate. An event happened. I observed stuff that worried me, and I presented a calm and measured response to it, explaining my position, explaining my worry, and trying to understand how these sorts of things happen. And you all freaked out. Several people tried to say I was making an argument from authority in comments beneath that, which of course is a logical fallacy, but an argument from authority specifically is a false authority. You know, it's your dad saying because I said so, right? Or a movie star giving you foreign policy advice, or whatever else. It doesn't apply when we're talking about scientific consensus or someone with a legitimate source of authority, such as an education, for example, in politics, which I have. Plus, I was not saying I was right because I had an education in politics. I was saying that I had the right to express an opinion and that maybe you should pay slightly more attention to it because I had an education in politics. Right, so it wasn't Trump is a fascist because I have an education in politics and I say so. It was I have the right and the right grounding in political science, political analysis, political philosophy to offer an opinion on this. Because people were saying stick to games, you know, the usual stuff they say to sports people, and that anyone has the right to express an opinion on politics. But my point was, you know, I have the basis to do so anyway, and some authority, some genuine authority and applicable education. And I guess lastly, on the Kalergi plan stuff, people were a little bit more interesting on that this week, though you won't know it from the first couple. Just Old Dog says, even Stevie Wonder could see this as a planned invasion of not only Europe, but all Western nations. Be honest here. There is no indication that there is any sort of planned invasion going on anywhere. What we have is a dire set of international global finances, quite a lot of conflict and so on, and that is driving an enormous amount of migration, as one would expect to a large degree. That doesn't mean there's any plan, it just means it's the prevailing economic and social winds. That's all. Lano Tool says, you sound like an absolute gobshit clown. It's gobshite, there's meant to be an E on the end. You must be a member of the Tiny Hat clan, which, taboo and euphemism are always interesting to me. So when people find euphemisms for their abject racism, in this case anti-Semitism specifically, I always find it interesting, though sometimes it gets so opaque you can't decipher what the hell they're on about. But you know, just show your entire ass there, Tool. Upgrade 1015, a misnomer if ever there was one, says look into the Clyward Piven strategy, because that is real and that's being used against us right now. It's being used against all Americans. Well, I'm not an American, but the Clyward Piven strategy was a 1960s idea from some radical American sociologists and activists, where the idea was to get as many people as possible to apply for and get welfare from the US system, which has a paucity of generosity anyway, to create a massive bureaucratic problem which might help push the US towards a minimum income and redistributive income. Nixon, weirdly, was someone who was considering universal basic income. Not the Democrats, not so much. But this strategy was never really employed, though it took a lot of blame for various things, and it's kind of weird to go back to a discredited and failed strategy from the 1960s, which definitely isn't occurring anymore. And besides, if people are entitled to these welfare benefits, they absolutely should claim them. That's what we all pay in collectively for, so if you meet the requirements, you should apply. And lastly, Dylan Mulvaney official, which is anything but, says, do you think that now, because this video is 4 years old, do you think that now, because this video is 4 years old, now look at the southern border in America, 10 million illegals have been allowed to invade. Okay, well that's not true. Those statistics, the 10 million statistic, that's for encounters with border police, border patrols and so on. It's not the number for how many people actually succeed in entering the country and becoming part of it. So that represents more encounters at the border. It's also true, because of that the current Biden administration has removed, returned, or expelled more immigrants than the Trump administration ever did, and with an apprehension rate that is just over 2% higher, I think. So you have to be careful when you play around with these statistics, because claiming that this is evidence of Biden somehow opening up the borders and letting people in, it doesn't reflect that. Arguably, statistically, he's done a better job than Trump ever did at intercepting people at the border and turning people away at the border. And again, going back to earlier, the mass immigration that we're seeing, if we're genuinely seeing mass immigration around the world, is due to a whole lot of stuff that can be understood in the context of prevailing economic and social winds and conflicts around the world. Like, a lot of European immigration has been driven by the Ukraine war and the refugees that has created, for example. So it doesn't reflect any sort of plot or scheme. And that'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Zang. I'm now porn adjacent. I run a tabletop game stream regularly with some porn stars, which you can check out with suitable precautions in place at tabletopless.org. And just know that I put as much effort into this campaign as I would any other tits or no tits.
I can get you anything you want. You just have to talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. I'm your priest. I'm your shrink. I'm your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man. The Santa Claus of the subconscious. You say it. You even think it. You can have it.